Max, I'm going to send you a link that I would like to be put in the chat
Okay.
for when we start talking about summer youth employment. It's just like the regular website, but I'll send it to you now so I don't forget.
Sounds good. Cool.
Oh, I have one thought that I'm going to share. Tayin, as we talk about what people are interested in or looking for with regard to youth and education, I had mentioned that we might invite them, if people are so disposed, to think of it also in the context of this planning together process.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
And whether they have any particular comments in terms of how they'd like that framed or what they think that should look like or what have you.
Sure, a lot of stuff in there with school seats, et cetera. So yeah.
Yeah. Nasir, I'm not sure we've met, but I'm just going to say welcome. Thanks for joining us. I know you're. Oh, there you are. They took you off mute for a second. It's a little weird. If you may have been on some of these before, that only the committee chairs are unmuted through the meeting, and then you need to get, again, I think it's a little weird. You need to get sort of permission or what have you, or recognized in order to speak. But I still say good to see you, and I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. You too.
I still see people signing in, so if you guys want to give it another minute or two, even though it's about 6:30.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Let's give it 2 or 3 minutes.
Well, I'm going to welcome people as they come. I have a tendency to get in a conversation before.
Go ahead, sure, do your thing.
But Terry, I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
You're looking well. I hope I can say that. I hope that's acceptable.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. I found out I'm new to Lenox Hill Neighborhood House as the early childhood director. So I'm glad to be here.
Terrific. Ed's looking like a bridge as usual. Hi, Robin. Hi, Shannon. Hi, Karina. Hi, Sasha. Sasha, welcome. Looking forward.
Yeah, hi, Sasha.
Having you join us.
Hi.
Oh, there you are. Hi. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Sorry, everyone's just talking in my kitchen right now.
All good. Hi, Tyler. I'm not sure if we met. I'm Peter, but good to meet you.
We have not, but nice to meet you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Tyler, good to see you.
I'm going to talk for about another 30 seconds, then I'm going to turn it over to Taina. But I discovered it's now something like, I don't know, 12 or 15 years ago, I discovered I'm really a teacher. I had a career as a management consultant to a bunch of companies, some of which you've heard of, like Coke and Pepsi. I'm sorry, Pepsi and Citibank. You can't consult to both Coke and Pepsi, trust me. That's like World War VII. But I discovered I'm a teacher, and part of my just the way my teaching style evolved is it's like very interactive. I like to hear what people are thinking. Billy, thanks for joining us.
Max, do you still see folks joining, or you think we can get started?
Let me see. There's still some people starting to sign in, but we can start getting started with my little pre-meeting speech if you'd
Sure, that'd
like,
be
and then we
great.
can really get started. Okay,
Perfect.
fantastic then. All right, so welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us, everyone will remain muted throughout tonight's presentation except committee co-chairs and presenters. Following the presentation, co-chairs will call on members of the public that wish to speak. You can participate at that time by going to the reactions icon and pressing raise hand and not the wave or thumbs up button. And only press it once, because if you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. Please note the chat is for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems and not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They won't see the chats. If you have an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raised hand feature there. And finally, don't raise your hand, your real hand, or wave at the screen because the co-chairs won't see you there either. Go ahead, Taina.
Thank you, Max.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Manhattan Community Board 8's April, I guess we're almost in May, but April Community Board 8 Youth Education and Libraries Committee meeting. If you joined us last month, we were hoping to be able to have a representative from the New York City Department of Education new chancellor's office. We weren't able to secure someone, but the invitation's still out, and we're hoping to have a representative from Chancellor Porter's office to share a little bit about her vision for the DOE and for schools during this really critical time. As myself, Peter, and Rami, my fellow co-chairs, were thinking about sort of the important conversations we need to be having around education, we thought about just what an important but tough year it's been for our city's schools, children, teachers, principals, and DOE staff, right? So, in the midst of a pandemic, with public health being the top priority, as we've heard from school leaders and parents and students themselves, sometimes education was not at the forefront of what our city was prioritizing, frankly. And so as we, as co-chairs of the committee, think about the topics that we need to be covering as a committee over the next, critical few months and year, as we hopefully come out on the other side of this pandemic, we really wanted to open up the conversation to our fellow community board members and to the community sort of writ large, to hear about directly from you about the issues you're facing and the education issues in our community specifically that you think are important. And so we have, I think right now are, obviously things are sort of normalizing a bit in the Department of Education, with more and more every week, more and more kids K through 12 going back into city schools, with closures becoming less frequent now that the COVID protocols have been updated and changed. But still, schools, certainly in our district and throughout the city, facing an enormous amount of challenge, and facing the realities that exist, which are just frankly that there was obviously, a disconnect in the past year, and kids missed out on, critical learning. Obviously, teachers did their best with online learning, but, kids missed out on a lot, both academically and extracurricularly. And so I'd like to open up the conversation here. I'll turn it over to Rami, who I think has very interesting perspective to share as a DOE student himself, who's been learning from home for the past year. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Rami, and then if we can open it up to a dialogue about what issues we think are of greatest importance in this community.
Yeah, for sure. So adding on to Taina, and the part of why we're hosting this too is to really get a sense of the issues that our community and our community board want to hear about education, and this will really help us plan for future meetings and future discussions that we would like to have. As a DOE student, there has been a few changes recently, as I said in our last meeting, PSAL has returned. That's the Public School Athletic League. My school has 4 PSAL teams, 3 girls teams and a boys basketball team. And the boys basketball team had tryouts today, which was like, it felt like normal. It was really nice to see that. But one of our girls teams already had COVID cases and they're currently quarantined for 14 days. So if that's a sign of things to come, I wouldn't be surprised if other teams, not just in my school, got quarantined. Besides that, as I said in the last meeting, there was a survey that was released about opting in. So the opt-in period closed earlier this month, but students were able to return to school this Monday and 2 Mondays ago, so the 19th. And so that was the final opt-in period that the DOE had released for students. So if you were signed up for full remote at the beginning of the year, that was your last opportunity to opt in to do blended. And we still have the majority of our school is still out, and our teachers are actually 60-40 still, so 60% in, 40% out. And so as we begin to plan for next year, there's still a lot of unanswered questions, as we said in the last meeting, that we would like to have more clarity on what we're looking at for next year, more specifically with this 5-day-a-week thing that the mayor had risen, where he wants every school open 5 days a week and what that would look like. And so one of the things that we're going to discuss later in the meeting, but I'll bring it up now, is the Summer Rising program. That was a new DOE initiative that was launched 2 weeks ago, where it's their new summer school plan that's going to incorporate aspects of camp and summer school. And it truly looks like a nice program that's coming together. And I think they're going to be testing, this is just pure speculation, but I think they're going to be testing models for what a school year could look like. But I think ultimately it's going to be really school-based and really superintendent-based based on district. So I think I'm going to open up now. If Peter wants to say anything, Peter, do you want to say anything?
Well, I'll just make a brief comment and then turn it over to Taina. And it's the same comment I made just as we were getting launched, which is obviously it's been a trying time. Obviously it's a challenge, for students, for families, for teachers, for administrators. And frankly, I think I'm certainly have a large measure of concern about that, and concern about what the relaunch is going to look like, and our ability to effectively, capture, serve, and support every student wherever they are coming out of this period of, challenge and some degree of chaos. So that's sort of the retrospective and sort of current set of issues. Part of what we're open to and looking to discuss in this session is what your interests and concerns are, at present and going forward. And I'm just going to summarize my issues and concerns by being it's almost everything, but it starts with early education and universal literacy up through, pre-K up to 3rd grade. And then it's supporting every student from 3rd grade, primary school, middle school, high school, into college and career. One sentence of personal bio is I overdosed on academics, like more years ago than I want to admit, but it's getting on like 4 going on 5 decades. And so I'm both in love with education. I was in love with my students when I was teaching. I love the whole field and support. And all we want to be as a committee is supportive of you and your family, our community, and the people you care about, we all care about, in terms of having the support and the education they deserve. And that's a huge challenge, because last comment, I was a management consultant to large corporations and small businesses for like 30, 40 years. When I started teaching, I found the challenge raised by about 3 or 4 orders of magnitude to be really good and effective at what I was trying to do. So it's a huge challenge. It's a huge opportunity. And I'm going to turn it all over to Taina.
Thanks, Peter. So I think at this point, I'd love to open it up first to members of the public and then to board members. So please sort of raise your virtual hand and you'll be unmuted by Max. Just gonna shout out that I see several, what I believe are school age attendees that I'd love to hear from. I think no one has better perspective than students that are in schools and really living through what has been a really difficult year. So yeah, I'll open it up. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment or ask a question and share, please raise your virtual hand. Shannon Burkowski.
Hi. This is actually my first time at this particular committee meeting, but I've been on the CB8 meetings for a little while about the blood center. That's a whole different thing. I am the co-president of the PTA at PS 183, and we are definitely moving in the right direction. Like you said, we are planning right now to start 5 days a week on Monday. But I think throughout this whole year, one of the things that I think parents are concerned about is that the DOE is not listening to parents, that our voices are really being ignored, our concerns are really being ignored. And it seems that decisions coming out of the DOE are very last minute, without thinking long term, and just seems to be what's good for right now. So just using this past week as an example, the reason we're able to move to 5 days a week is because we're moving from 6 feet of distance to 3 feet of distance, which was announced a month ago. And though it was announced a month ago, the DOE didn't tell the principals their plans and their procedures until this week. And they're expecting schools to start it on Monday. There's just not enough time and there's not enough foresight into when they're thinking about their planning. And I think the same thing what Rami was talking about with the opt-ins. You know, in the beginning of the year, parents were opting in or out also with the assumption that there would be multiple times in the year to opt back in. And then that decision was just pulled out from under them. And there was just, again, there's just a lot there. It just doesn't seem like the DOE is thinking far enough ahead of what ramifications does this decision cause and what happens going forward. So I think, again, we are moving the right direction for this year. There's only 8 weeks of school left. So whatever it is for the rest of this year. Teachers not coming back. You know, the high school stills are going to be Zooms in a room, and I just don't think there's anything we can do about it now. I think parents are really starting to now worry about September and what's going to happen, what the expectations are, and also how much notice the DOE is going to be giving us. And I think that's a big, obviously we don't have a calendar for next year yet. There's just a lot. Are we going 5 days next year? The times of our elementary school were altered this year also, they're shortened. It's a slightly shortened day. Are we going back to regular school hours? There's just a lot of questions about September, and we're all really worried that we're not going to find out until September. So I think that's what I hear a lot of parent concerns being.
Thank you, Shannon. If I could just ask a follow-up question, because it's helpful for us as we think about the ways that we can, as a community board, support, parent leaders like you. Is it your sense that this sort of lack of knowledge or uncertainty or worry is not just parents, but also as you're talking to school leaders, that they too are unsure what the DOE guidelines will be?
Oh, absolutely. So this happened, and I unfortunately think that it was just happened to 2 districts in this city, but our principal had announced that we were going to 5 days about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that. And then even as they were meeting further with the superintendent, all the principals noticed that the information about moving to 3 feet was suddenly removed from the DOE website, and they couldn't find the information anymore. And then they got again, I think it might have just been, it might be communication mistakes, which happen, but it's also just part of a problem. Our superintendent then emailed our principal, all the District 2 principals, to say, we're putting the 3 feet on pause. So our principal then relayed that again, because our principal at 183 is absolutely fantastic, and being as transparent as he can with our community, he then told our families that the 3 feet was on pause, and everyone flipped out. It was just, it was really it was a really hard thing to hear after getting so excited. We had to tell the kids, oh no, wait, you're not going back to school 5 days. And then more information came out from the DOE. Oh no, we are going to 3 feet. And then all of a sudden he got the procedure about what he needed to do in order to get his school approved, which was not originally how it started. So I do know that I think administrators are feeling the same kind of unknown, they don't know. Also, there's been so many times throughout this year that we tell our principal what has come out in de Blasio's presser, because they find out the same information at the same time as the public does. So even the administrators are not getting previewed information or information before the public, or they get their information from the news and not from the DOE. So I do think they are feeling the same way.
Thank you. That's helpful. If there are not other members of the public, that you can raise your hand later, so that's fine too. But I'm happy to open it up to board members. If you'd like to raise your hand. Ed Hartzog?
I'd just like to echo what this lady just said. Now, full disclosure, my son goes to Browning, which is a private school, but I think private, public, it's all the same. In that one issue I don't hear anybody talking about, and my son's in junior high, he's 7th grade, and we're very lucky. We're very lucky as parents that my law practice allows me to be at home. My wife is lucky that she's a business consultant. She can work from home, so we can spend time and keep tabs on the homework. But I'm just curious as to when any policymaker is going to talk about the lost year, because let's be realistic. It was like vacation wonderland. Okay. I admit I was not at the top of my class till I started writing checks myself in grad school and law school. Okay. Full disclosure. And I'm sure there are a few folks still in public school like me, on the bus. Hey, what'd you get on number 5 on the way to school? I get it. And the point is, you're 7, you're 8, you're 9 years old, man. It's like, giddy up. It's, spring break all the way to June. And what about this lost year? Peter has put his finger right on it. For those kids who should be learning to read so they can read to learn, what the hell are we doing for them? And, maybe, the gray hair, even still there. I'm old enough to remember in Northern Virginia, you got held back. Maybe I'm living in another country, Northern Virginia was different, but, back in the day, you got held back. Now, I'm not suggesting people get held back, but what are we doing with folks who are just getting pushed along, who missed the whole year, who didn't have their parents at home because they had to go work? And, you're asking a 9, 10, 11-year-old child to look at the screen all day. And, my son can look at a screen all day with his buddies playing Fortnite and every other thing. But, looking at a screen about reading or whatever the course may be, I don't know if you're going to stay there all day. And I guess the point I'm making is I'd love to hear our policymakers talking about that. And not to be a downer, but also the reality is, I think some of this hither and yon, back and forth, not thinking beyond the end of their nose or whatever is in the papers, kind of policy making, decision making is absolutely horrific for parents. Like our colleague here who is running the PTA at 183, I mean, you're the last to get the memo. It's secret squirrel all over the place. We're going to have a brand new chancellor with a brand new mayor in the middle of another academic year. And they're going to come in and they're going to upend everything because they got new policies. And let's just face the reality of it. You're going to have a new mayor, new chancellor, whole new ball game. I'm just throwing it out there for our discussion of I would like to push as to what are we doing to make up for the lost year of education. And I'll just say to be, so they can get me on Twitter again like last night, I'll be the stick in the mud and say, you need to talk about it, gang. Okay, you can't just stick your head in the ground and go, oh no, they got educated. Don't worry about it. We'll just push them along. Push them along from 4th grade to the 5th grade teacher. And it's somebody else who has to re-educate them. So that's something I would just throw out for our discussion.
Thank you, Ed. Can we unmute Trisha and Teddy?
Hi, everybody. In full disclosure, I'm going to talk very quickly just in case Teddy loses it and then I have to leave. So I'm glad to have the conversation. Thank you so much for having it open-ended and just really looking for comments. Shannon, thank you again for everything that you guys are saying and doing. I think it was so spot on. I've heard a lot of times that there's just zero lack of communication coming from de Blasio, coming from DOE to our teachers. I think that it's a huge problem and just to echo that, yes to all of it. I also just want to, broadly, you were asking about some of the problems and there are so many, honestly, Taina, that there are just so many that I feel like if we really got into this, I could give you a laundry list. But some of the top ones I think are, speaking of lack of supports for lack of communication to our teachers and to our principals, we should also be looking at why kind of turnover for our teachers is around 5 years, I think, or less. There are just not enough professional supports for our teachers. And I think that this is something that is in our district, but also just throughout the city, how we're retaining our teachers, how we are helping mentor them, how the type of supports that we're giving for them to have supplies. We have 3 different teachers in my family who are all in different schools, and all of them have reported to us horrifying situations about lack of PPE, lack of communication from the top, lack of testing, lack of resources, really lack of mentorship. It's just fairly robust. I also just want to say that if we're talking about looking back, which I think Ed, it has a good point, after a year of in this, how are we retroactively looking back and seeing who we failed? I got my start as a school social worker. We have consistently failed our students with disabilities and our students who have IEPs. That is something that we've been failing to do even before the pandemic. And I read a Chalkbeat article, sorry, my son wants me to put the hair to tie in his hair. I read a Chalkbeat article recently that said that 25% of all students with IEPs failed to have services during the pandemic. So if we want to talk about who we failed, it's I feel like we have to start by talking about the students with IEPs and students with disabilities. To look at those students in our community, to see what kind of services that they are entitled to, and to see whether or not they receive those services, I think would go a long way towards really fighting for the most vulnerable families in our community. Because let me tell you, they never get enough advocacy. They never get enough support. The reason why they're not here tonight is because they're too busy taking care of their kids and their families, which is so understandable. So I wish that we could really look closely at our children with disabilities, our children with IEPs, and really see how they've fared throughout this pandemic and what we can do there. The other things I'm just going to mention is that obviously another example of the DOE not listening to parents and not listening to our community is the failure to reopen the dual language program on 76th Street. That is something that I wish that we would not give up. I know that we've passed a resolution on the past, but this is still a problem, and still for several families in our neighborhood, they are without a school next year because of it. We also should be looking at technology. And I've heard from, again, this is mostly anecdotal from our teachers, but we've heard from many of our teachers who told me that they had to all of a sudden be tech support because all of those beautiful laptops and tablets that their kids were given only worked for a certain amount of time and then they broke. So how is that technology going to continue if people are opting in for another year of this, or if their children have specific health needs that means that they are vulnerable and cannot be back in the classroom? How are we making sure that their tech is working? Again, it goes back to students. And then I'm never going to not talk about the need for additional support for children who are younger than 3. And I know that this is something that we kind of talked about in another setting, but you saw that my son is 2. And for parents who have children the ages of 0 to 3, or 0 to 4, actually in our district, there is no support. There is nothing to support these families, and childcare costs somewhere between $35,000 and $60,000 a year, and it has been really difficult. So yes to helping our students who are in school right now, because I know that this is the education committee, but also as it relates to childcare. I'm just never going to stop beating the drum. We need universal childcare. We need 3K in our district. We need 2K. We need 1K. Really, we need universal childcare. I'm going to always argue it's the best thing that we can do to recover economically from this crisis. That's just a start, but I'm going to leave it there, and that's where and I'll let others speak. But thanks.
Thank you so much, Trisha. Sandrea.
Hi, greetings all. Yes, and I live, as many know, and some may not know, I live in public housing. My children are grown, of course, but I have 2 grands, but they're not here. But when if my granddaughter stops by, then she can do some of her homeschooling here. But some of the residents are having issues with their internet. Either it's not working right, it's sketchy over here in the developments, and/or some people have lost their internet due to this pandemic, which is a problem as well. And I wonder how this community board can actually, I'm not sure, I think this is the only NYCHA development under CB8, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. How could we advocate for these 5 buildings to be wired with Wi-Fi through the city, which this was something that the mayor had spoke about in the past. And this is, in such a time like this would be good for our school age kids, as well as some of them that are in college that, don't have access to the internet. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandrea. I mean, critically important stuff to be talking about. We had our last committee meeting, we had a representative from the New York Public Library, and it was frankly sort of heartbreaking to hear some of the stories about the beginning of the pandemic, families, students actually really trying to get close to the library outside just to get Wi-Fi. It should not be happening in a city as rich as New York, that's for sure. I don't see any other hands up, but thanks for the thumbs up, Sandrea. Rami, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll yield if someone else raises their hand, but Shannon, I really do appreciate those comments. I was at my school's parents association 3 weeks ago, and a parent asked my principal, hey, what's the deal with opening schools earlier in the day? Right now our start time is like 9:30, 10 o'clock sometimes, depending on what the entry times are looking like. And he was like, to be totally honest, even next year, he's like, we can't push it any earlier than like 9:30 because the COVID protocols take so much time to get through. I was at my building earlier today, and there was no line because I was there in the afternoon, but it took me 15 minutes to get in the building. And I have to say that this is another issue that Peter Taina and I were talking about offline was that's only a snippet of what students who have metal detectors in their school have to go through in order to even get to the classroom. They've had to traverse sometimes dangerous places to get to the school building, and then they're frisked to get in the building. Yeah, so that's another issue. And Shannon, I do appreciate that. And from a student's perspective, yeah, we are the last people to find out about all of this. And we find out the same time everyone else does occasionally through the news. And we're always the last ones to find out about school policy changes when we're the ones that are impacted by it. So, and that's an issue that we would like to reflect on more as a committee. Ed, you had brought up some points about the COVID, what educators call the COVID slide. It's named after the summer slide, but with COVID. And we discussed this in our, almost a year ago now, I think it was our June 2020 meeting. And I think that is a topic that should definitely be brought up again as a committee, because truthfully, that's what's going to affect. There's been a tremendous amount of learning loss. Like as a high schooler, I see the tremendous amount of learning loss that from last year's syllabus to this year's syllabus, and I can't imagine what it's looking like in elementary schools. And Ed, if you want to speak, I'll yield. But
yeah, thank you. No, I got it. Thank you. No, you're absolutely right. And it's enough already. The adults in the room gotta be adults, okay? All due respect to the teachers, you gotta go back. I haven't met a parent who has not said you gotta be in person. You've got to get back to normal. You have got to go back to work, people. You have to go back. I know it's been wonderful. You're getting, it seems to the parents, private, public, I talk to all the folks, my friends around the country, friends of mine who have kids who are in school or not in school, got to go back. The kids want to go back. Where's the camaraderie? I mean, you're right. I mean, Rami, you're absolutely right. I mean, the slide, my goodness, just the natural slide from June to September in a normal year, forget about it. You have to, so, all due respect to the teachers, it's got to be about the students, gang. Enough about the teachers. They have their own union. They got Michael Mulgrew. They got their money from Albany. Yeah, I got the money. Teachers, it's the kids. It is the kids. I'm sorry to get so passionate about it, but it is about the future. The children are the future, gang. We're not going to be here. I'd love to be here in another 60 years. Not going to. So it's about the next generation. It's about teaching them, and they're losing that opportunity. What are we doing to get them back in person and learning? It's just, you can tell me all day long, I'm a lawyer. I deal in rationalizations all day long. I spent 3 years with people rationalizing whatever they do illegally. Okay, we can come up with whatever for whatever decision, but enough with the rationalizations. Back in school, get the kids in person. I don't know. That's just me. I'm just going to stay on that. So parents can also plan. Shannon made a good point. And how can you plan? How can you plan, Shannon? Right? We can't plan. How do you plan? How do you plan? My God. I mean, public school, like I said, private school, we have the ability in private school. Okay, I'll just say it right out. They banded together. The parents, I'm not part of that 34,000 that left. We stayed here, okay? And the point was, people at the private schools are saying they want their kids back in school so they can plan. The parents can plan their day. How do you go forward? How the kids have a schedule, consistency, I think is the word I'm looking for. And if you're a private school parent, what you can do is you call up the school and you go, you know what? If you're thinking about not going back to school, please let us know, because we're thinking of sending our child to boarding school or day school. And you'd be amazed how all of a sudden, yeah, Shannon, I see you smiling. I know you wish you had that option. No, we're thinking of maybe just bolting. You would be amazed if you told administrators and principals, we're thinking of bailing on you. We're going to bail. And it's amazing how, oh, really? Guess what? We can all go back now. Oh, we'll figure out a way. As Rami, as you said, all those protocols, maybe we don't need all that. So I don't know how we do it for the public folks, for the public schools, but they got to go back, okay? Protection and all that. I get it, but got to go back. That's all I'm going to say. Sorry.
Thank you, Ed. No, it's okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Rami in a second, and then I see that Billy Freeland has his hand up. And then I just want to encourage again, this is the education committee, so I can play teacher and call on people, but we really want to hear from members of the public. I see many of you showed up tonight, and so I'd love to hear from you, maybe why you showed up tonight, any perspective that you want to share. It's really important to us, frankly. I'm obviously not in the public school system right now, and I don't have children in the system, right? So to the extent that I can sort of lead this committee well, I'm really just so happy and privileged to have Rami as a co-chair because he has that perspective on the ground. But it's really important for us to hear from as many parents as possible and as many perspectives as possible from the community. So I encourage you to raise your virtual hand. I'll turn it over to Rami now.
Yeah, one more thing real quick, and then I'm sorry, Billy. But Ed, you mentioned something you mentioned the COVID slide, and one thing that has been really interesting. This happened in 2019. Was the DOE invested into something called the MAP test. I couldn't tell you what the MAP stands for, but it measures academic success in a way that the state test cannot. It's a completely virtual test. It costs money, but the DOE invested in it. They put a lot of money into it. I don't know the exact figure, but it was in the millions back in 2019 to get any school that wanted to offer this test, the test. And the test is offered, I think you could do it quarterly or on a trimester basis. I think that's how it works best. So you test everyone at the beginning of the year and you get a scaled score so that you know what percentile everyone falls in, and you could standardize it based on the grade standards, sometimes set by the state, but not all the time, or your school standards. And you test 3 times a year, super easy. I think they take like an hour and a half per subject, and there's just English and math. And that really gives schools the data that they need. The sad thing is that MAP tests went by the wayside back last March because schools were just so overwhelmed at the beginning of the pandemic, which is understandable. They could have done them in June. Many schools opted not to, including my school. And MAP tests were not offered at all this year. And my principal had stated that they're just going to start again next year and just collect the data. That means we both as a community board, the policymakers that are in charge of setting the standards for the state tests, the schools themselves, so they know which teachers are doing better than others or which students are actually succeeding in school, and just the Department of Education as a whole is not going to have the data that they need in order to figure out what's wrong next year. So Billy, I'll yield to you.
Thanks. So thanks everybody for putting this discussion together. I think it's really important. I'll keep it brief, and I hope I'm not repeating something Trisha said, because I know Trisha was hitting on pre-K and 3K, universal childcare, but just on the 3K piece specifically, Councilmember Kalis was at the full board meeting yesterday, and I think I've heard him say this a few times. It's great we have 3K coming to our neighborhood. Now, where are the seats going to go? Where's the capacity? Where are the buildings going to be? And I guess one question I have for this committee is, what role do we see ourselves having in helping to identify where we're going to have 3K seats? And that seems to be one of the biggest tasks ahead of us. So, I agree there's a ton of issues and I could go on, but just to kind of focus the conversation and focus this committee's mission, I'd love to see us have a very hands-on role in figuring that out. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm going to go a little out of order here and call on James Poulos, who's marked as Robin Poulos. First of all, thank you so much, James, for joining us. I hear that you are working on your citizenship in the community merit badge for the Scouts, and that's why you're here, and that you're a 5th grader at St. David's School. This is exactly what we need. And so yield to you, and please tell us a little about yourself.
Okay, so my name is James Poulos. I go to St. David's. I'm in 5th grade. And so I can't speak for public schools because St. David's is a private school. But I think being in person has allowed me to socialize with my classmates and build better bonds with them and my teachers. Um, and, and being virtual, really, I feel it makes it harder to learn. And really, it just makes it, and I feel it makes it harder, just like, because when we're on Zoom or something, when people share screens, sometimes it can lag and then it's very blurry. But in person, yeah, it can still lag, but it can't lag as much. Like the whiteboard doesn't really lag that much. So when we're virtual, it like, and sometimes it gets blurry when we're virtual. So when we're in person, also, we're not staring at a screen like basically 18 hours of a day. We're just focusing on a whiteboard, and it's just not as hard on our eyes, I feel, to like just be in a class. And also we can exercise more during like sports periods, mainly because like it's easier than like just it's more effective, I feel, like to get our energy out than just like being in a room in your house and just like doing a couple of stretches and then like playing like a Kahoot or something. But also I feel it's like for public schools, again, I can't really speak on behalf of them, but I feel I get a good education at my school, and I think I speak for all private schools when I say that I feel public schools should have the same amount of education as we get. So like, yeah, being in person, like not like, and when we're in person, like not having to like be like that far away from each other, like being able to talk to each other and being able to so at my school, I'm not sure about public schools or any other school, but we definitely have office hours on Zoom after school ends. So I feel, I'm not sure about public schools, but I feel that if they don't have that, they should, because that way you can do extracurricular activities, and also you can do like practice for the upcoming quizzes or upcoming tests or work that you need to do. And talking with your friends online also helps a lot, because now that we have Zoom, we can like get on a Zoom call with a couple of our friends and then like just still talk and work better with each other. And being in person, I feel we don't have that, or being virtual, I feel we don't have that ability.
Thank you so much, James. It sounds like thank you. That perspective was really important. First of all, our community board represents all kids in our community. So it doesn't matter that you're in private school. We represent kids in private school too. So your perspective is really important. And if you have any free time, we'd love to have you join Community Board 8. You are incredible. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now I will turn it to Amy Schwartz.
Hi, thank you. This is my first time here, and I welcome the opportunity to talk. I represent, or I'm on, 4 Freedoms Democratic Club. I co-chair the education working groups. We last week had an education forum on just this topic. Our concern was how are kids and families coping with and preparing for return of school kids to the schools virtually or actually in person. We had at our presentation Ben Kalos. He spoke about what the city council is doing, what he sees as far as what they are doing, what they're not doing. We had a policy director from Advocates for Children, and she spoke about the current policy challenges, as well as her concerns for the impact of all of the COVID issue on equity, on low income families, and disenfranchise those children as well. Then we also had parent leaders from District 2 and District 4 to show a difference in the equity issues. Some of the key topics that we saw, and the reason why we pulled this together, was just what we're hearing. We wanted to hear what parents are feeling on the ground and their experiences, and what we as being a grassroots position can help to bring these issues to the forefront and help some changes. One of the things that we did find It's a great concern. I think this was brought up as well by Sandra, and that is concern of what we call digital divide. And we all know about this as well. This is when not only, we saw this in the very beginning, when there were kids, families who didn't have access to devices. And if they did, they were not effective. An iPad was not good for kids in high school who need to compose. They were devices that were given that were not in the appropriate Wi-Fi. That deals with the question, the concern of families in housing projects, as well as those that are in deserts. The concern as well was, okay, you get the devices, but you don't have appropriate support. You have problems. How can you get these problems resolved? So the concern, again, with digital divide was paramount. Concerns that were raised, and these were addressed early on, was the concern of the kids that are learning loss and what is being done about that. And Ed, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, that we've got to deal with these because there are concerns that if you don't deal with them now, they're just going to keep on building up over the years. Ben Kalos heard that. I can't speak for him on everything because I didn't take all the notes, but he did address that concern, and the mention of the Summer Rising program, I think, is one approach. I like when one of the students here mentioned that could be a model for DOE to learn about how they could learn from this for further teaching. But clearly, the issue of kids losing academic was addressed as well. All in all, I think the issues that I hear tonight are the same ones. And I really would like to say that what was affirming for me was hearing Ben Kalos and others on a policy level, really trying to find solution to this and listen to you all. One last thing, the concern of parents not feeling that they were being involved was paramount. One of the recommendations from Advocates for Children is to have parents involved in the decision-making now, to have them involved with DOE now, to have a planning effort that involves not only parents, but other key stakeholders, including students, and see this as an opportunity to get parental input as a stakeholder in this issue.
Thank you so much, Amy. Tyler Fishman.
Hi all, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Rami, for getting me involved. This has been an incredible discussion. I've learned so much. If I could just offer my personal experience, what I've learned from it. I go to SAR High School, which, like James, it's a private school in the Bronx. And we fortunately have been open, doing the hybrid model 4 days a week, school 1 day a week on Zoom. And just a second, what Ed said, there is nothing that can even remotely compare to being in person, in a classroom, socializing, interacting with your peers, eating lunch, just the ability to gain social skills and have that growth, not only on an academic level, with that being said, I also think there's
You're breaking up a bit, Tyler.
Can you hear me now?
Can you say like one more sentence and I'll tell you? Nope.
Can you hear me?
You're coming in and out.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Try turning off your video and see if that helps.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh. Am I better now?
Right now, yes, but keep talking so I can tell you if we can actually continue. There you go.
Where did I cut off? Sorry about that.
I think you should start again.
Okay, perfect. My name is Tyler Fishman. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you, Rami, for getting me involved. This has been a great discussion. I've learned a lot from you guys. If I could tell you what I've learned from the pandemic, that would be great. Like James, I'm a private school student on the Upper East Side. I go to SAR High School, which is a Jewish high school in the Bronx, and we have been doing the hybrid model. So that's 4 days a week in person, 1 day a week on Zoom. And if I could just second what Ed said, there is nothing that can even remotely compare to being in person, in school, with your peers, eating lunch. I think there's two aspects of that. First is educationally, sitting in a classroom, you gain more than you ever could from looking at a screen. Very difficult to pay attention when you're sitting looking at a Zoom screen for hours on end. In person, being able to take notes, not having to juggle many different devices really allows you to learn. Then there's also the aspect of social skills. I think if this were in June, when I was on Zoom for 3 months, I wouldn't have the confidence and the social capability to really interact with this group. You need to be able to, have interpersonal relations to really grow as a person, especially as an 8 or 9-year-old kid. I couldn't imagine being that age and not interacting with anyone. I also think from the beginning of the pandemic, I saw the mental health toll that this is taking on kids in particular. It was pretty dreary and it was really tough. And I think as we emerge from this, there needs to be accessible mental health resources for kids who have dealt with issues over the pandemics, perhaps losing a loved one, perhaps having a parent who's at risk and not being able to go anywhere or do anything. We also need to destigmatize that completely. I think everyone has experienced something like that. And I've also seen what it takes to safely reopen. My school took out a $3 million PPP loan, obviously not something that's at all available to public schools, unfortunately. But we also had a 70-page handbook that every single student needed to read cover to cover and sign. We have PPE stations located throughout the school, social distancing dots. I think we need to really codify and inform everyone of what's necessary to reopen, because if there's one thing we all want to do, it's we all want to get back into school and we all want to be there for as long as we possibly can. And to do that, that requires a full hands-on deck effort. And I think we also need more community engagement in that, whether that's people from this board going into the schools and spray painting social distance dots on the school, or volunteers to sanitize desks in between classes. There's definitely real tangible things we can do to get schools reopened and get everything, functioning like it was pre-pandemic.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Sasha?
Hi. So I also go to a private school. I go to the Hewitt School, and I'm a junior right now. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about what Tyler was saying, the mental health issues. I know I do a lot of work with my school in terms of mental health awareness and destigmatizing mental health in general. And I think that during this time, it's really important to just take into account everybody's emotions and how they're feeling, and know that this is a really hard time and people are feeling a lot of stress and a lot of pressure on them. And I know especially for high school students, it's especially hard. And I see, as a junior, I see all the pressures like the SATs, college admissions. It's been really taxing on a lot of us. So whether it's just putting up signs in our schools, encouraging people to take a deep breath and calm and relax a little bit, and that's kind of what we've been doing at my school, just to help a little bit. So I encourage people who are around my age to try to get involved with their schools. I don't know if anyone else's school has mental health awareness club. My school does, but I think it's really important. And I think just virtual learning has completely altered the way that we're learning, and it's been really hard. And I know that it's specifically hard to participate when you're over Zoom. And I personally feel for me, my learning has it's been detrimental to my learning, because I don't feel like I can participate as much, or I feel like it's easier to maybe relax a little bit or turn your camera off. And when you're in school, you don't really have that option. And I think that there's also been a really big issue at a lot of schools with cheating. It's much easier to cheat when you are over Zoom, so much to the point that at my school, we haven't had a single test this year. It's only been essays and projects, just to reduce the risk of cheating. And I think that especially during this time, if everybody's getting good grades, it's really hard to differentiate yourself and to stand out. And it's really an issue.
Excellent point. I didn't even think of that. Tyler, I don't know if you still have your hand up from before, or if you'd like to speak again, I'm happy to let you speak again.
Yeah, if I could just add one more thing. I've also seen through the pandemic, my brother has ADHD and language-based learning disabilities. And I know that students like him, who are already greatly underserved by our city's educational system, have not been able to learn at all throughout the pandemic. And for those students, it's not a matter of really making it up and trying to sort of catch up, it's a never. That, I mean, it's remarkably difficult to learn already, and to get back to where they were is going to be almost impossible. So that's something that we really need to work towards and strive to have a plan to get those students back on track and able to, learn adequately.
Thanks, Tyler. So at this point, I'd like to just ask one final time if there are either members of the public or of the community board that would like to speak. I think I speak for, my co-chairs as well. This has been an incredibly informative conversation. Really helpful to have just real world perspective from parents and from students in the community. So really grateful for that. I think in the months ahead, we'll really think about how we can engage with the Department of Education. Clearly, communication has been an issue. And I think that sort of what we're seeing, and I think sort of as New Yorkers, we've always known this to be true. The reality of school for the past year for students in private schools was just vastly different from that of the average public school student. And that is horrific and should not be the case. And it certainly should not be the case in the upcoming year when we've gotten so much in federal and state dollars for our schools, right? Like, just money should not be the issue. And so we will, sort of huddle and think about the folks that we can be inviting and frankly demanding to show up to these community board meetings and talking to our community and to parents and kids to answer these kinds of questions. So I don't see, I'll turn it over to Peter, and then Rami's just going to lead a brief conversation about summer youth employment, which this has been sort of a lot, the discussion tonight has been a lot about a lot of the difficulties we're facing, but one exciting sort of thing is that summer youth employment is back in New York. And so Rami will share a little bit about that, but I'll turn it to Peter. Did you mean to have your hand up?
Yes, I did.
Great, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. Actually, I learned a lot out of this session, and I look forward over next future meetings hearing more. One thing that struck me with we're having the difficulty with Tyler's communication was that I'm pausing slightly because I taught at the college level, but I actually think, education in the early years is critically important, in some ways more important than subsequent years. And when Tyler was having trouble communicating, when we had that technical difficulty, that's probably a lot like what trying to learn through hybrid and Zoom sessions is like. You get a partial communication, but A, the communication is incomplete, and B, because it's Zoom and you've got, sort of many people trying to compete for that, in that video resource, you can't verify whether what you heard or thought you learned, what you thought you heard was actually what you heard. In other words, it's just underscoring the point that several of you made. I see your face, Ed, and others, how much at risk we are, particularly in the earlier years, I'd say up to third and fifth, sixth, even into middle school, of people being at risk for their future education because of what they just went through. Beyond that, I have a page full of notes. Incidentally, Amy, I listened to your session. I thought it was several of the speakers were excellent. So thank you for that. And I also want to mention to Shannon, I mean, I would love, if it feels right and is appropriate, to strengthen our relations with the schools and the parent-teacher associations. And again, if they're Zoom or in the future when they're in person, I've done that in the past. I would love to have closer ties with you and your school and your teacher, your PTA. And I'll leave it at that. But there's a lot to be said, and frankly, you all just heighten my sense of concern. Actually, I would say one other thing, which is I'd like to think going forward how we can supplement and complement, what's going on in the schools. The extent to which we might be able to help support programming after school, which could be enrichment, it could be music, it could be chess, it could be a whole bunch of things. It could be tutoring in terms of homework. Education is hugely important. I totally respect the professionals in that field, but I also think that we as a community, I'd like to invite us to look at how we can be more supportive of what's going on in the schools to support the overall experience that our students are having. And now I see a couple of hands raised. Can we go to Marco first and then Ed again? You'd like to comment, Marco?
Thank you, Peter. I was listening carefully the students, and you can find the difference between private school and public schools. You see how they express very well, while the public school, they are not interested probably in this kind of programs. And the reason is because they have more disadvantage, and we don't have a programs for them. And that is the main issue of the society, is to catch up those children that come in behind, because those are the children that become the problem for the society. We need to bring to the society together, and we had to create plans for them, specific plans. If they were late already before COVID, now probably those children will be even more behind. So the first priority what we had to create is to help those minorities, which coincidentally is going to the public schools. And the public schools, seeing that the mayor removed the Mr. Carranza, which I think he shouldn't do that. If he believes that he was wrong, why he hired him at the beginning? So in the middle of the pandemic, to change the direction, I think it's wrong. This is the head of the Department of Education. So we have to start thinking in the head, because if we move the heads in different direction, we want to probably do better. But why you hire in the beginning him? So my major concern, what I find is this problem of education that we have. It didn't happen about 2 years or 3 years. I joined the community board 12 years ago, and that was the same problems. So basically, all the council members uh, didn't put attention to all the preschools, high schools levels that we need a space. We need a physical space. Now I hear that Mr. Telos came yesterday saying, help me to find a place. Well, just walk their avenue and you have plenty of spaces. The only thing is easier for to install an education place venue, because according with the zoning regulations, this is a community facility, you can put it anywhere. So there's no problem of the space. The problem is, yes, you rent and you resolve immediately, partially the problem, but the funds, it will be limited. Rather to start thinking in a plan to build the schools, to build in our community, so our children don't have to go far away from our community. And that is my major concern, that we don't have enough space for the children. They have crowded rooms, and we have to fight for them. We have to create that. Technology is good, definitely, without no doubts. But you can see the children that in the way that they express tonight, they saying, "Oh, I prefer to be together rather to be on Zoom." Of course, Zoom, if you don't have supervision like Ed has with his child, it is useless. Why? Because the child is going to look another thing. It will be more interested to do something more attractive rather to study the boring that the teachers try to teach. So the disparity creates serious problem. This pandemic that we didn't finish yet. We are hopefully at the end. But my concern is we need to create more public space, physical space, so we don't have to rent, because if you rent is more expensive, and the funds for education, it will be less and less and less. So my perception in this case is we need to pay strong attention to public schools, especially in minorities areas, because those are the people that need more. And probably we have to start thinking for remediation class for them, and create something very specific for these children, because these are the children that come in behind. I'm impressed to see how those children, they just express their ideas tonight. How beautiful they express. I mean, of course, this is private schools, and public school doesn't have the same reputation. the public school, we have to work harder to catch up with the private schools. In any event, they receive money, they receive payment. And if they receive payment, I don't understand why there is a disparity in performance in public schools, when in reality, all of them should perform equally, at least as average or better, no less than an average. So it's something wrong in the system. I know the system is huge, and we need to start thinking in a different scale to catch up these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Ed?
Thanks, Taina. Really, one just simple point. Peter made me think of this. What I'd love to see is something a contracts professor told me in law school. And I'd love to see our teachers give our students a thirst for knowledge. That phrase always stuck with me. It's that thirst for knowledge. I think it feeds off of what Peter's always said about learning to read so you can read to learn, having that thirst for knowledge. So, I'd like to see going forward for teachers, educators, are you instilling in our students a desire, a love, a thirst for knowledge that will serve you for the rest of your lives? That's all.
Thank you. So Rami, I'll turn it over to you, unless there are other hands to talk about open issues, if you can just lead the conversation on summer youth employment.
Yeah, so thank you, Taina. So almost full circle. So about a year ago, when this was our first meeting when we went virtual, was a discussion on summer youth employment. So last year, summer youth employment took a huge cut. At one point, there were very few jobs available. So for those of you that don't know, summer youth employment is a program that's subsidized by New York City that helps get students 14 to 21 jobs over the summer. And a lot of students really rely on these jobs for either to help out with their family over the summer or to get valuable work experience that can help them later in life, or just to really have a paying job, just to get some experience. So Max has dropped in the chat the New York City website for summer youth employment. I believe the application is still open. There's 70,000 jobs available this year. It was expanded after its budget cut last year. But thankful, so last year at the beginning of the pandemic, it was one of the first programs to actually get cut because they're like, well, the students can't work in person. Well, it's too much of a COVID risk, and the money was gone. They restored a little under 50% of it at the end of last year. So there was a program last summer. Granted, a lot of the opportunities were virtual, very few were in person, which was actually harmful because a lot of students rely on those programs to stay out of their house if they have a large family, or they would like to get some in-workplace experience. But so this year, the program has been expanded. There's 70,000 jobs available, and they're paid. They're all paid positions, and those jobs are really valuable to our students, and especially students with low incomes or larger families. So Russell actually brought this up, and I think it's right now it's a valuable time to discuss this because it's not summer yet as much as we're hoping it to be. But I think that I'm pleased to be able to talk about summer youth employment in a way now that it's been expanded. So if anyone wants to make a statement about summer youth employment or talk about summer youth employment, I see Trisha has her hand up.
Yeah, so thanks Rami so much. I'm guys, if you remember last year, I was a big proponent of this. I still am. It's an intersection of both. I think a wonderful program for our youth in our city, but it's also a big parks issue because our Parks and Rec is one of the biggest departments that uses our youth and our youth workers. So it's combines two of my favorite issues. So I think that this is great. I think that we should just make sure that we're doing as much outreach as possible to promote it. So I'm curious, Rami, if you guys can talk about, have we reached out to our high schools while we're still in school? Have we reminded them of this? Have we, I'm like, would love to know if we're doing anything with this Stanley Isaac Center. Are we talking to are we posting this in other areas? I'm on all the mom chats, which are generally more young kids, but like, what are we doing to get the word out there on this? We want to make sure that we have robust participation.
If one of my co-chairs would like to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I wanted to talk about it now. I think frankly, we haven't done enough. And, you know, I can turn it to Peter if he has anything else to add, but really haven't done enough. And I think there was a lot of conversation sort of last summer about, you know, the program not happening. And so I think, you know, it was fairly relatively new news that the funding would be restored for that. And so we are definitely going to look to ways to get the word out about this. And it might be worth even having someone from DYCD come to a meeting to talk to the committee and to talk to the community. But I think you're absolutely right, Trish. I think that we need to probably do a better job of getting the word out about this.
Actually, just one quick suggestion. Would we like to put on the table a resolution that the full community board could pass at the next meeting, simply in support of this? I mean, I'm glad to hear that funding's been restored. I'm glad of the number of positions. I'd like it, like everything else in education, to get as much visibility as possible. And it could be a very simple resolution in support of the program and support of community activity to engage and take advantage of those summer youth employment opportunities.
Just a clarifying question. This is not a full, this is not a full return of funding as it was previously, right? This is still cut from, I guess, from FY20. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I think it's still lower than fiscal year 19, actually. Fiscal year 20 was where they cut it. But I believe, I think you're right, Trisha. I don't think it's at 100% of what it was pre-pandemic, but I think, I think Peter just put a resolution in front. I think we should say that
Peter, I would just add a friendly amendment to that if I could, if we want to you know, celebrate or recognize the importance of the SYEP. I think that's great, but I would still call for additional funding. That program primarily helps Black and Brown students. It is a program that I think is somewhere between 70 and 80% students, Black and Brown students. It is an essential kind of source of income for these families through the summer months. I still will say that we need funding levels that were to the pre-pandemic level. Even if that means that they are still remote positions, they're not always, and particularly when it comes to our parks, so we know that they're in person. If you would be willing to look, I mean, it is a significant amendment, but I would say yes to promoting this, yes to continuing to see the power and benefit of funding and investing in our kids. But also that if we're going to invest in this, we should do so with wholeheartedly invest in it and do so to the levels that were pre-pandemic.
I certainly accept that as a friendly amendment. I see Russell, would you like to speak?
Thanks. So to the point that Tricia just made, you know, one of the things that Gail Brewer often talks about is all the federal money that is coming to the city and the state through the, you know, the Biden stimulus, and asking boards to sort of weigh in on how it should be spent and that kind of thing. And so I think when it comes to summer youth employment and calling for more funding for it, I think we can also explicitly call out the fact that we'd like some of the federal stimulus money to be spent in that way. And the other thing is, I think we can also think about, you know, other ways that we'd like to see that that money spent in the educational context. I mean, I'm not sure what specifically in terms of the sort of prior discussion about the challenges of remote learning and you know, the loss that's taken place in the course of having gone through a year of that. You know, I'm not sure what you know, what sort of specific things we might want to fund to try to ameliorate that situation. But you know, it's you know, we could think about that. And the other point I was going to make is, I think to what you were saying, Peter, about basically trying to figure out a way that we as a board can help, whether through some kind of after school programs or something. I think it would be good to you know, basically get in touch with school districts perhaps and see, basically just sort of ask them what we can do, you know, reach out to them and say, look, we're the, you know, we're here's the community board. It's a lot of folks who you know, have a sort of range of you know, skills and abilities and what have you. I mean, what can we do? How can we help? And what can we organize? So I think that's a good next step there also.
I think I do like that idea. And so I think, Russell, adding on to what you said, I think the way to do that, to address that COVID slide, is to first get the data to see where we're falling behind. And that's through the MAP tests, the MAP tests. So I don't know, Peter, this can be up to you, but in addition, or a second resolution, maybe supporting the return slash, I don't know if the MAP thing was defunded. I don't think it was, but the return of MAP tests in every DOE school. And in addition to fully funding and expanding summer youth employment.
Right. I have a couple of thoughts, but Gail, do you want to speak?
My question is the deadline. I believe it's about 8 days before the application process closes. And if that's the case, then I think with the Summer Youth Employment Program, what we should do is have something on our website highlighted tomorrow morning to get the word out, because I think all the suggestions that have been made to date are excellent, but we want to make sure that we figure out at least, or, you know, being able to email to, I don't have any contacts within the DOE, but whatever that process is, ensuring that if they're not already on it, that they should be, because it would be a shame, even if there's not adequate funding, to not, you know, to have positions either waylaid or people in our district not, you know, benefiting from them, because I'm sure other districts are looking at this.
And I actually, you make a good point. I actually think the deadline actually already is tomorrow.
Really?
Tomorrow, Tina?
Hmm?
Yeah, we should check that.
I don't know if it's possible to get something out as early as sometime tomorrow through the.
I thought it was April 30th. I had heard that earlier today. I could be wrong. We'd have to look that
Will
up.
says yes. I'm seeing 2 thumbs up from Will. So yeah, okay. So the deadline's April 30th, but I think that even if we pass a resolution and it goes to the borough president's office after that time, I feel like there's still, summer doesn't start for a while, and unfortunately in New York City. I think that the program still can be expanded this fiscal and this actual summer. So I don't think it would hurt.
Okay, I have a couple takeaways. Tricia? And Gail, do you have another thought? Are you?
No, I'm fine. I'll take that down.
Can you hear me now? It is
Yes.
the 30th. I put the application in the chat. My microphone died, sorry. And you can find the deadline on the application.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that I think that we're talking about 2 different issues here. I think that we're talking about, one is outreach for the current deadline and for the program, which I would say that if the deadline is April 30th, and we should start tomorrow and go very hard, to Gail's point. Will, I think that you said Monday is your next like e-blast out or blast out or whatever that is. But if that's the case, then like certainly if that can be in there. But if we have lists of our high school of our high schools, which I'm sure we do, if we have outreach there, we should be sending that stuff out just as soon as possible. And I'm sure Amy has her own connections through FDA for Freedoms and other places. Like we should just be having a coordinated effort, which I don't think needs a resolution, but just needs action and emails as soon as possible. And then I think that the resolution is still strong as is. I think I would probably say that I think the strongest resolution is one that just stands on its own. So I would argue with respect, Rami, to whatever you and Peter want to do, I would say that it's probably best to focus just on SYEP for this resolution would be my preference, but whatever you guys want. But I do think that you're right, Rami, to that the resolution is irregardless of deadline. It's really yes to this program, yes to continuing it, and let's expand it with all the pieces that Russell mentioned before.
So Will, if you want to say something.
Oh no, I was just going to say it was in our last e-blast on this past Monday, and I believe in the e-blast before the application, and so I'll definitely have it in this next one as well.
Thank you, Will. So I believe there's a resolution on the table that we support summer youth employment, and we would like it to be expanded to above pre-pandemic levels, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Good.
So can we get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Let's vote. So Russell, I don't know if that's an old hand or you would like to speak.
I was just going to say, to the point that others were making, it seems to me that the deadline, some number of people will have signed up or, applied by the deadline. I think the amount of funding that there is will affect how many of those people can participate, how many kids, and at what level. And so I think, to get more funding to it, even after the deadline for applications, I think is still going to have value because it's going to impact how it actually gets applied.
Agreed. I didn't think about that. That's definitely an interesting perspective. So voting, if you've never voted, this includes public members. So if you would like to, so the way we do voting is that if you would like to vote no, abstain, or not vote for cause, please raise your virtual hand on Zoom, not your physical hand. And we will call on you to explain your vote. Seeing none, the resolution passes unanimously.
And I just have to read everyone's name into the record.
Okay,
if that
so
works
those
for me.
present are myself. Hold on, let's make this bigger a little bit. Myself, Russell Squire, Peter Patch, Taina Barrero, Billy, Ed, Elizabeth, Gail, Marco, Rebecca, Sasha, Sandrea, Trisha. I think that's everyone. And myself, if I didn't count.
Get Elizabeth Rose.
Elizabeth. I counted Elizabeth.
Good. Okay, great. And actually, I do want to pick up on the other comment because this issue of learning loss could not be more important. And one of my useful takeaways is that it's now further indelibly ingrained in my consciousness. And I can imagine either of two ways, maybe there are other ways to proceed on that. One, if it's of interest, we could have a resolution about it. Second, we could have this as a focus of perhaps one of more than one focus of our next meeting. I don't think we could put too much emphasis on encouraging the Department of Education to both, and I'm sure they're thinking about it, but sort of plan for, communicate about, and engage the public, including parents, teachers, and students in a conversation around how to address this issue of learning loss. Because I do think some very significant portion of students are going to be at risk going forward. So do we want to?
So if someone wants to take me up on this, but I think the thing about these MAP tests should be included in a resolution on COVID slide.
I'm certainly fine with that.
Okay, so a second resolution would be we would like the DOE to address and communicate what they're doing to combat academic slides due to COVID-19.
Yep.
And a part B or a part 2 is restore let's do it. Mandate MAP tests to measure academic success in a low pressure manner in every school in the DOE system. Any additions to that?
That works for me.
Works for me.
Okay. Do those count as seconds or do I need someone?
Sure, second.
Okay, second. So any
discussion? No discussion. I think we can, could somebody call the question?
Call the question.
Question's called. Great. And well, as you were saying, Rami, if anyone wants to, what are the categories? Abstain,
not vote for cause or voting no, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will read the names into the record. Myself, Russell, Peter, Taina, Billy, Ed, Elizabeth, Gail, Marco, Rebecca, Sasha, Sandrea, and Elizabeth, did I get you or did I miss you? Elizabeth. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
I'd actually like to add one additional thought, and I'm thinking of Sandrea in particular, and anyone else who's interested as we discuss this, about the possibility of engaging with Greg Morris, who's also in the community board and runs the community center at Holmes and Isaacs Towers, as a possible point at which we could provide some of the kinds of support services to our students, but all students in the district, but particularly those districts, those students who are, potentially minority, disadvantaged, Black, brown, and other minorities through the community center at Holmes and Isaacs Towers. So that's just a point for future discussion. Sandra, if you're still listening, I will follow up with you. And we can pursue that as an offline conversation. Having said that, any other discussion?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was unmuted, but not to speak. I put my thumbs up, but yes, that's fine. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Great. Any other discussion? Any other points?
Yeah, briefly, I just wanted to welcome Sasha Behrens as a new public member on this committee. I just want to say welcome, and we're glad to have you.
Oh, I absolutely.
Welcome, Sasha.
So thank you, Russell, and welcome, Sasha. So good to have you. And also want to thank James for joining us and all the other sort of new members that we have.
James, you made it.
James, yes, thank you. Congratulations. We hope
James, I think you earned your badge today.
Yes.
That's right.
Great.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Ed.
Yep.
Yes. Second.
Second. I see some seconds. So,
Many seconds.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you so much. See you next month.
Thank you.